Do you remember the late-night cable show Masters of Horror? It was an anthology horror series on Showtime, with every movie directed by an established horror director.
Those were some great times.
The film I'm reviewing for you today feels like an extension of this idea. It's a 2-hour horror anthology film called Satanic Hispanics, featuring short stories from 5 directors that are Latino as fuck. Órale! Needless to say, I was sold on the idea the second it was announced. An indie horror anthology from 5 Hispanic filmmakers? You bet my Mexican and Puerto Rican ass was excited to watch.
You see, that's what I'm talking about.
The best part? It not only lived up to my expectations, it quickly became one of my favorite movies of the year.
Everybody down! El Paso Police!
Why don't you fill me in?
27 dead bodies, all shot in the head. And only one survivor.
When some people hear the term Latino, they think of it as one general group, when in reality, it's a mixture of different cultures, homelands, and ideologies.
Educate yourself.
Satanic Hispanics is a reflection of that. It's 5 stories from 5 prolific filmmakers: Demian Rugna, Alejandro Brugues, Gigi Saul Guerrero, Eduardo Sanchez, and Mike Mendez. Each of these filmmakers have made a significant impact on the horror genre, and I'd like to think that this collaboration is a celebration of their careers and their Hispanic heritage. It also feels like a love letter to the genre itself, providing rich, entertaining stories with an amazing and kick-ass soundtrack. If you're familiar with the world of indie horror, or television for that matter, then you'll recognize a lot of faces that appear on screen. Each segment, or short film, is broken down into chapters, each with their own unique style of storytelling. All 6 chapters do have one thing in common, and it's not just the fact that people die in horrific ways, but each story deals with an ancient evil entity of sorts.
Pure evil straight from hell.
For this review, I'm going to give a brief and vague explanation of the chapters, along with my thoughts on each story.
There are portals back and forth from one realm to the other. Problem is sometimes the portals don't close once they're open.
Chapter 1 is the introduction to the main wraparound story, and judging from the cast itself, I'm guessing this one was directed by Mike Mendez. This section of the film takes place in El Paso, Texas. Here we are introduced to the Traveler, who gets arrested at the scene of a brutal crime. While being interrogated by the police, the Traveler recounts tales of horrors from his life, chronicling portals leading to other worlds, mythical beings, and other supernatural forces.
Well, I love a good scary story.
Chapter 2, the first story that's being told to the police, is about an algorithm expert that encounters a ghost inside of his home. This to me was the scariest of the 5 stories, and considering that it's from the same director that brought us Terrified, I'm not surprised at all.
You scarred me for life!
The opening scene is a bit odd, but as the story gets fleshed out, it becomes a reflective nightmare that'll make you question if what you're seeing is even real. This to me was a perfect way to kick off this film. The actors are great, the story is great, and the performances are just fantastic.
There are powers far darker than death, man. Forces far deadlier than I or you could even possibly comprehend.
Next up, Chapter 3 is a vampire tale, brought to us from Blair Witch Project co-director Eduardo Sanchez. This is the point of the movie where things begin to take a comedic turn. This segment is absolutely hysterical. Here we follow a vampire who's kind of an immortal idiot. This vampire is hundreds of years old, but somehow struggles to find his way home after a night of feeding.
I've been there before.
There's one scene in this chapter that made me laugh so hard. It's the kind of scene you expect to see on the television show What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes, very good, thank you.
After the intense and scary moments in the previous segment, Chapter 3 was a welcoming addition to this anthology.
Siento el palpitar de tu sangre en mis ojos.
Chapter 4 is a ritualistic story, and quite possibly the most intense of them all. It's about a man who gets hunted down and brought into the jungles of Mexico for some type of ritual. This story is the first thing that pops into my mind when I think of this movie, and it's a testament to Gigi Saul Guerrero's work as a filmmaker. This short story is the most symbolic of the 5, and even features some elements of body horror that will stick with you long after you watch it.
It may shock you.
Needless to say, Chapter 4 is the most memorable and impactful of them all. It's one of those cinematic moments you'll never forget, like the time RoboCop shot that dude in the dick. The 5th chapter is the final story leading up to the conclusion of the wraparound. It's about a man who fights off an ancient Cuban evil, with a very questionable weapon at that. This was the segment that took me by complete surprise. I was not expecting it to play out the way it did.
What a wonderful surprise.
Chapter 5 feels like a grindhouse movie. Makes me wonder if Alejandro was inspired by Tarantino and Rodriguez. The opening portion of the chapter is dialogue heavy, but when the action starts, that's when shit really starts hitting the fan.
That escalated quickly.
This is another fun segment that will leave you laughing, mostly because of how absurd it is. It's the typical good versus evil scenario, with one giant twist that brings a whole new meaning to the phrase tallywhacker. Chapter 6 is the conclusion to the main story, which is an absolute bloodbath. Between each chapter we get to spend a little more time with the traveler, as he's trying to explain to the police that time is running out.
Detectives, you have no idea what is coming. If I don't leave here within the next 90 minutes, we are all going to be dead.
When the time does run out, we are introduced to a mysterious stranger for one final fight. Chapter 6 is one hell of a finale. This was a great way to close out the film. I enjoyed every single chapter up to this point, but I have to admit that the main wraparound story is what I loved most in the film. It's the most action-packed one of the bunch, and it ends on such a terrific note. So much so that I would love to see a sequel to this of some kind.
Give me more!
If you love the artwork that's on the film's poster, then you will not be disappointed in the final chapter. If you're into Masters of Horror style anthologies like VHS and Nightmare Cinema, then Satanic Hispanics is a must-see film. As I mentioned earlier, I enjoyed all of the segments. Each story could have been its own feature film. They're all epic and unique in their own way. I loved the characters, the monsters, and all of their quirky dialogue. It even has a kick-ass soundtrack to boot. Satanic Hispanics is funny, scary, and entertaining as hell. It's a horrific package full of delicious treats. Kinda like a piñata, stuffed to the max with full-size candy bars. If all this sounds good to you, then click the link in the description below to find tickets available near you. Satanic Hispanics is coming to theaters on September 14th, right at the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. Something this special has to be seen on the big screen.
Exótica.